imagine being transported into a trio of horror scenarios where your goal wasn't to destroy the evil or even to escape. As the title of the game I'm looking at here suggests, the goal is to not escape. That's right, the Don't Escape Trilogy is about not escaping the situation you're in. But admittedly, what that looks like in each of the scenarios is a little different. Does this interesting premise lead to a game that you don't want to escape, or is it going to have you running for the exits? Let's find out. Don't Escape Trilogy is a collection of point-and-click adventure games developed by Scriptwelder. These games were originally released as flash games on the internet, the first being released in 2013, but have been packed together as this collection. The trilogy was released in 2019 for PC. On Steam, the game goes for $4.99 at regular price. With it being a rather indie title, there isn't any ESRB rating that I could find. The title would probably be M. It does contain dead bodies and depictions of violence, but they're pixel art and not super frequent. The stories found in this trilogy of games are not really going to wow anyone. While the stories do get more complex as you progress from one game to the next, none of them are particularly long or involved. There is the interesting idea of not escaping baked into each of the stories, but in some ways this both makes the stories more interesting and makes the story a bit predictable at times. In the first game, you are a werewolf that finds a cabin on the day of a full moon, and you have to figure out how to make sure you don't escape the cabin and hurt anyone during the night. This is the shortest and most straightforward story of the bunch. You either succeed or fail in your attempt to keep yourself locked up. Don't Escape 2 finds you in the midst of a zombie apocalypse. In this entry, you're trying to fortify your temporary base so that you can survive the zombie attack that will come during the night. This entry adds some more complexity and has multiple endings depending on if you succeed and how. Did you survive alone or with the other survivors you found on your journey? Don't Escape 3 places you in space, where the crew of your spaceship has been killed and you're trying to figure out what happened to them. This story is the most complex of the bunch and also has multiple endings. There is also a bit of a mystery to solve here, but I felt like the story was fairly predictable, in part due to the general theme of Don't Escape that the game holds to. While none of the stories were long or complex, I did still enjoy playing through them. Even playing through all of the stories multiple times, I was able to get through this in about 2 hours. If you come into this expecting games that are basically 3 reverse escape rooms with a little bit of background story, you'll probably be pretty happy with this. If you're expecting a deep or complex story, then you're probably going to be sorely disappointed. The Don't Escape Trilogy is a point-and-click adventure game through and through. You find items and then figure out the best way to use said items to accomplish the goal of that game. Thankfully, all the uses are fairly straightforward and you don't have to use the video game logic that is found in some other point-and-click adventure games. While the interactions with items do get more complex as you proceed through the series, they all remain pretty solid in having this foundation of being able to understand what their use could be for. The second and third games in the series do have a time limit to them, but you'll probably run into that more with the second game. That's at least the one I noticed it more in. You are given a limited amount of time to prepare for the zombie horde, and certain actions like traveling to one of the 5 locations or improving your base takes time. Improvements can take less time if you have recruited other survivors because they help you out doing whatever that task is. If you run out of time, then the end of the game is triggered and you'll see if you prepared enough or not. The third game has a time limit too, but there wasn't quite as much that required you to use time when compared to the second game in the trilogy. This largely just meant that you couldn't make all of the items available in the fabricator since they took time to make. There were still additions in this one, such as a tablet you carried around where you could find story logs and later on video recordings that helped you piece together the mystery of what happened on the spaceship. Overall, the gameplay was very solid, but is pretty standard point-and-click adventure gameplay. If you're expecting some unique nuance to the gameplay here, you're probably going to be very disappointed, but I didn't have any problems with the gameplay. I felt like it was a good, solid point-and-click adventure game and was pretty much what I would expect. The Don't Escape Trilogy has a pixelated art style, which is okay, but definitely isn't the best looking pixel graphics I've ever encountered. Even so, it does wind up working fairly well to create a creepy and foreboding atmosphere. This reaches its peak in the third game, which creates some pretty unsettling moments with the use of the graphics and art direction. The sound direction of the game is used to give atmosphere and a sense of dread, but isn't very complicated. Again, I would say that it is utilized best in the third game, as some of the sound effects in it give you a sense of tension surpassing any of the other 2 games. There definitely isn't anything in the art or sound that is going to stick with you here, but they both do a decent job of presenting a tense and foreboding environment fitting of the horror story situations that they place you in. You can also definitely see a refinement of both of these elements as you progress through the games, which is also nice to see. The Don't Escape Trilogy is a solid collection of games. While the games are short and not all that complex, they were still fun to play and to figure out how to solve the puzzle that you're presented with. Given that this is also a very cheap title, the shortness of the game isn't that big of a downside. That said, I do think that the lack of complexity and depth keeps it from being great. While I don't have a lot negative to say about the games, I can't say that any of the games from the collection really wowed me either. They're all just very solid games in what they do. The concept of not escaping is interesting, but I don't know that it really fundamentally changes the point and click formula all that much, or at least enough to set it above just being a solid entry in that kind of genre. Since I enjoyed the game and thought that it was solid, I'm giving the Don't Escape Trilogy an 8 out of 10. I think that if you enjoy point and click adventures, then this will give you interesting stories and situations to try to solve. There really isn't anything that I exactly disliked about the games. Even the fact that they're short, not too complicated, isn't really a bad thing. It may just keep the games from being great. I would definitely recommend looking into this collection if you're a fan of point and click adventure style games with a slight horror theme. I know that I enjoyed it, and it makes me interested to play through some of Scriptwelder's other games, including the 4th game in the Don't Escape series.